Hi there folks, and welcome to episode 3 of the Dauntless Discussion, where we talk about everything Dauntless. Begin with, I hope everyone's had a very wonderful Frostfall and a brilliant new year. I myself was very unwell during the entire festive period. However, it worked out to my favour, because having time off work and when my strength returned, I was finally able to pour some proper time into the game, and I was able to unlock the Silver Sword and the Frostfall Crown. What a grind that was. I'm so glad to get that done. Anyway, the event is now behind us. We're looking to the future, 2024. Now we have a lot planned for the show today. We're going to look back into these developer blogs about the big update coming this summer. We're going to look at the New World map, which the developers have teased and it looks very interesting. We're going to look at some of the new creatures they plan on adding to the game. We're going to look at some island fixtures and events. We're then going to look at some of the buff changes they're going to be making, for better or worse. Some of this looks very interesting, some of it looks like it's going to make a lot of sense. However, I can imagine a lot of players out there are going to be quite concerned about these buff changes. I also plan on splitting up the video by talking about escalations. What are our favourite and least favourite escalations in Dauntless? Also very glad to welcome a special guest on in the show. Now, this is the first special guest I've had on the Dauntless Discussion Podcast, so I'm very glad. ShireenPlays, who has an enormous YouTube channel that covers a wide variety of video games, including our very own Dauntless, has agreed to join me today, and we're going to talk in detail about the New World map. We're going to look at what we think the developers are going to do with this world map, and we're also going to talk about what we want to see personally. It's all very exciting. But anyway, if you are new to the channel, please feel free to like, subscribe, or leave any kind of comment in the comment section below. But without further ado, let's get started. So back to the Dauntless website and back to these devlogs. Today we're going to look at buffs, all about buffs, all the buff changes coming to Dauntless in the new update, and the world of the Shattered Isles, because the devs dropped a very interesting looking map and some new fauna and a lot of interesting little details here and there that they plan on adding to the game to make it a bit more three-dimensional. So let's just dive right in. Defend the frontier. The world of Dauntless, shaped by ether and replete with lush forests of towering trees and active volcanoes, plays host to humanity and a myriad of other creatures, some docile, some dangerous. Up until now, we have not placed much focus on truly fleshing out this world, out to its full potential. Instead of simply being set dressing for hunts and frights, we want our world to be a place you actually care about, one that offers you more immersive gameplay experience. To that end, we've been working on several new additions and improvements. A brand new world map will give you a closer look at the shape of the frontier, show you the threats the world is currently facing and highlight the impact that you have on the world as the Slayer. New complex creatures will add more variety to the ecosystem and affirm behemoths as the apex predator in the Shattered Isles. Additional world fixtures will give more character to islands, improved island events will make the world more dynamic, brand new legend hunts will tell unique stories about specific enemies. The world map. To guide you through your adventure in the Shattered Isles, we are introducing a brand new world map. For the first time in the history of Dauntless, you will get a detailed and clear look at the shape of the frontier. The world map will also show where each region lies in comparison to other notable places and isles. You will be able to see the edges of Avalenia, distinguish the borders of Ostia, and observe just how remote the Skaldyscar Isles are from the rest of humanity. Aside from being a visual compass, the new world map will replace the hunt screen as your main menu for selecting hunts. The map will be divided into 6 regions: the Monstrous Verge, Skaldyscar Lowlands, Stormwall, Ostian Borderlands, the Reach, and the Crystal Sorrow. Each region comprises of 4 islands, one of which is the main font of power in that region, the Escalation Island. As you explore each region, there will be unique masteries, collections, and story quests for you to learn more about what's happening in that corner of the world. To give you an idea of what you can expect, here's a preview of the Monstrous Verge. The islands are always drifting, leading these ones to settle near the heavy pool of Terra Ether in Arborhorn for now. This region will be home to many terra behemoths. Unlike the monstrous Verge, you may be familiar with the open beta, which had a mix of islands of different elements. So keep that map in your mind for now, because we're going to return to it and look over it and evaluate it and dive into a little bit more detail on how we hope it's going to turn out after I finish this blog. So continuing on, with behemoths being a persistent threat in the Shattered Isles, it is your job as Slayers to defend the islands and keep these beasts at bay. As such, we will introduce a new mechanic, defense scores. What are defense scores? You will have a defense score on each island. The score measures the combined activity by you and your guildmates on that island. At the end of every season, each island's defense score resets to 0 and everyone in the guild will be rewarded based on their score achieved. Defense scores represent the fact that behemoths are a persistent and ongoing threat in our world, and that each island must be defended by Slayers like you. So through this mechanic, we want to encourage new Slayers to join guilds, give more experienced Slayers something worthwhile to compete for, and foster the opportunity for guildmates to work together. Guilds with the highest score on a particular island will become the rulers of that island the following season. This means your guild title and tag will be displayed for all to see, all season long. We are talking about top tier bragging rights here, as you deserve. And then we have new creatures. The world of the Shattered Isles is inhabited by more than just humans and behemoths. Come the summer of 2024, get ready to meet 3 new creatures: Orquids, Vespers, and Cheoxes, if my pronunciation is correct. Orquids have sharp appendages and the ability to launch elemental projectiles. They are stealthy creatures which will ambush any unwitting creature or slayer. Vespers are extremely territorial flying insects that hatch from nests. They are poisonous stingers and will defend their nests with their lives. Cheoxes are a new type of theropod. They are highly intelligent, hunt in packs, and their mixed subspecies specialises in different forms of attack. You might be asking, why add new creatures? For starters, we wanted to bring more diversity to the types of encounters available to you on the islands. These small moments of surprise can break up the monotony of hunting behemoths. Having these creatures roam the islands also allows us to demonstrate the complexity and wonder of the world's ecosystem, all while firmly cementing behemoths as the apex predators in this world. Behemoths are the biggest enemy you will come across, but they are certainly not the only foes out there. We know small creatures that perish after a hit or two often present more of an annoying distraction rather than a meaningful challenge. With this in mind, we designed fights with Orchids, Vespers and Cheoxes to be more substantial encounters of their own. These creatures will boast a series of interesting attacks that can do real damage. Unlike the smaller creatures we currently have, for example Gruk-Gruks, these new creatures are not simple kills. They will require some focused combat to defeat. Fights with them are intended to be more challenging than the smaller creatures, but less challenging than the behemoths. We are still working on finding out the right balance for these creatures and their corresponding rewards. Currently drops include materials that can be used to craft tonics, grenades and pylons. This would replace the passive act of gathering materials. Additionally, these creatures might also guard little secrets on the island and reward you with things like bonuses, chests and more. And then we have world fixtures. Aside from new creatures, we have also been adding more interactive world fixtures. We are currently exploring having shrines that can grant temporary power-ups when unlocked, chests that require special abilities to open, and special quests that can only be completed while you're on the island. Our goal is to make exploring other parts of the island not just rewarding, but also fun. All these would still be in service of the key thing that matters most in Dauntless, slaying behemoths. And then we have legend hunts. Legend hunts are a brand new hunt type. These hunts will let you take the fight directly to the behemoth slayers, where you will then face off with fearsome foes boasting new models and updated movesets. These hunts should challenge even seasoned slayers who think they have learnt a behemoth's rotation. Each hunt will reveal unique stories about specific enemies. Some of the legend behemoths we are working on are, Setikai, the Fallen King, Rock, the Roof's Mother, and Kagu, the Black Flame. So, how do we feel about that? I must say, there was so much information packed into that blog. and just about all of it fills me with a lot of excitement. I feel like the New World map is going to be an amazing addition to the game, and it's going to make the Shattered Isles feel much more like home. I'm interested in seeing how that guild mechanic is implemented to the game, and how well it actually works. Dauntless has been crying out for more guild implementation since the very beginning, so this can only be a good thing as well. The new creatures are really going to flesh out the world by adding new challenges and more character. I believe that island fixtures will also add a lot more depth to the game. Having some in-island quests, such as NPCs needing your help, adds some much needed chaos and urgency to these islands. And finally having these legend hunts with unique and named behemoths in their lairs. These kind of unique boss battles really excite me and could add so much character to this game. I think my only slight concern is they were indicating that they might be taking away harvesting materials, where you now harvest them from these new fauna creatures instead of just gathering them. And I know that's just a slight pet peeve, but it's something I do enjoy doing in the game, and I would be a little bit gutted if they took it away, but it's understandable. Now before we move on, let's just dive into this world map in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about what I think the developers are going to do, and let's talk about things that I hope to see. So here we have a glimpse into a part of the new world map, the Monstrous Verge. And let me begin by stating that I really like the artwork here. I love a world map. Going all the way back to the 90s when I used to play Pokemon, The Legend of Zelda, Dragon Quest, right up to the Elder Scrolls, Daggerfall and Morrowind, I've always liked a world map. It helps create an element of immersion, and it makes you feel like there's a living, breathing world that you can interact with. That is, if implemented correctly, and I feel like they are doing so here. So developers stated there's going to be 6 regions: the Monstrous Verge, as you can see here, the Skaldiscar Lowlands, Stormwall, the Ostian Borderlands, the Reach, and the Crystal Sorrow. I believe that each region is going to be home to different elemental behemoths, such as the Monstrous Verge, home to Terra behemoths, the Skaldiscar Lowlands, Frost behemoths, Stormwall, Shock behemoths. Not too sure about the Ostian Borderlands, the Reach, possibly Umbral behemoths, and the Crystal Sorrow, most likely Radiant behemoths. Although they're going to have to merge some of these elements onto these regions because there's too many elements for 6 regions. So for example, Frost, you might have some Umbral behemoths mixed in there, Shock, you might have some Fire behemoths, and so on. I believe they stated there was going to be 4 islands per region, with the main island acting as the escalation for that element. For example, you can see we have Arborhome here, which is going to act as the Terra escalation for this region. And then I don't believe that each of the remaining 3 islands are going to be different styles of hunt. For example, hunting grounds or patrols. I believe that all 3 islands are going to act as the new patrol hunt mode, with each island varying on behemoths, and then you being allowed to choose a level of difficulty on each island. For example, the lowest difficulty will be the lesser version of that behemoth, working its way up. And then with the developers now stating they plan on continuing the hunting grounds, I think you're going to unlock the hunting grounds once you complete a set of patrols on each island, and then you'll be able to choose, once you've unlocked that, whether you want to have the old school patrol hunts or whether you want to do the stay and slay hunting ground hunts. I believe that when you're on the islands doing these new patrols, you're going to have a variety of different unique scenarios that take place. For example, here in the Monstrous Verge, where there's lush foliage and dense forests, there could be Farslayer villages where Zelia Farslayer appears and has a quest for you to defeat a behemoth that's damaging one of their villages, something like that. Or another example, you could be way out in the Skaldiscar Lowlands where Linnea Silver has a quest for you, looking for you to test your might against frost behemoths, something like that. But I do believe you're going to have to unlock the hunting grounds by completing a variety of these new patrol hunts. But these are just some of the ideas I have. It's all really exciting and it gives me something really to look forward to in this update coming this summer. Please let me know your thoughts or what you'd like to see in the comment section below. So as I stated earlier, we're going to be joined by ShireenPlays, who has a brilliant channel and a very good knowledge of Dauntless in terms of both gameplay and the lore. If you could go and check out her channel if you get a chance, it would be greatly appreciated. I particularly enjoyed this What's Happening to Dauntless video that she uploaded about a month ago, because it was very relatable. Shireen talks about her connection to Dauntless and many of the things she enjoys about the game. However, she also talks about her frustrations, especially with the last year, which many of us probably would agree with. Now here Shireen offers her opinion about this world map and what she would like to see in this big update coming in the summer.
There are a few things I'm looking forward to with the new world map coming to Dauntless in the Shuttle update this year. One of them being lore. I am a big advocate for lore in the game. You know, characters like Lena Silva, Zayla, Janik Zai, you know, them talking about places like Ostia and Arborholm and Skaldeska really makes me want to go there and see for myself. Now we have a little bit of everything in the game now. We have a little bit of Arborholm with Agaris and the Terror Escalation. We don't really have anything to do with Ostia. I don't recall seeing anything from there except from people like Janik Zai. Skaldeska, obviously we have Lena Silva, the Silver Sword, we have that lore as well. But to actually go to those islands and to see those things for ourselves would be an incredible opportunity. Second of all as well, to actually be able to use guilds with the map as a defense mechanism is just an incredible way to introduce a type of community into the game. Obviously there are players that play the game, but you know, having a friend list in the game is one thing, but actually having a guild and building up that reputation and actually getting XP and items from that reputation is going to be really cool as well. And you're going to have to like schedule things, you know, one person's going to have to be on the server, not all the time obviously, but to make sure that the island is defended if you become the island champions would be really cool. And the last thing I really want to see is more community, you know, more community events. We had the Void Runner community event, and that was a really cool event. We all worked together, you know, to unlock those special cosmetics from that event, and it was really cool, and I really did expect more of that. And obviously that was to do with the cataclysm in Old Ramsgate, which moved us to New Ramsgate. But I think there could be a lot of opportunity, especially with the guilds and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those things, and I hope those things are implemented. Also, other things that were going to be added to the game but seemingly disappeared, like pets and sky fishing, also things I'm looking forward to.
Thank you again, Shireen, for joining the podcast today. You make many good points, most of which I definitely agree with. And yes, sky fishing, whatever happened with that? That would be a great addition to the game. Okay, so moving on. Before we talk about the next devlog, which is about buffs, I'd like to split up the episode a little bit by talking about escalations. What are your favourite and least favourite escalations? Why is that the case? Okay, so first up, Radiant. I do quite like the theme of Radiant escalations. I like the moonlit sky, I like the time warping temples, I like the optional dungeon-like puzzles you can solve which give you a further boost before fighting the Chronovore. I also happen to really like the Chronovore itself. It can be quite a complicated behemoth to take down, but I think it's very unique and otherworldly. And then you have the legendary weapon which can be obtained from the Chronovore, where you draw temporal power of Radiant Ether to return to wherever you were 3 seconds before. Not the best ability out there, but not the worst. However, I do find the art styles of some of the Radiant landscapes a little bit dull, and I really don't enjoy fighting a lot of Radiant behemoths. In my opinion, and don't shoot me down, that Radiant behemoths are some of the least satisfying to take on. And don't get me started on the Alera, the newest behemoth added to Dauntless. I find it a bit of a mess, lots of different parts just randomly put together, and it can be extremely frustrating to fight against. I'm also not too keen that it took over the summoning stone at the Paradox Breaks from the Chronovore. The Chronovore was just so much better suited there, I feel. But overall, certainly not the worst escalation, but definitely not my favourite. And then moving on, we have the Blaze escalation. I very much enjoy my time playing that one. I think the theme and the art style are brilliant and treacherous. I love the densely packed jungle which surrounds the volcanic landscape. Blaze behemoths can present a really deadly challenge. I've always personally found the Hellion to be underrated in terms of how difficult it is to fight. And then you have the Torgadoro, an ape built from molten lava, absolute badass in my opinion. His unique animations alone are some of the best in the entire game. The legendary weapons you can craft from the Torgadoro look wonderful, and their unique legendary abilities aren't too bad either. When activated, they allow you to enter a rage state, gaining new attacks for 15 seconds dealing plus 25% damage when the target is below 50% health, and it resets on a behemoth kill or after 90 seconds. Next up we have the Umbral escalation, which is very dark, very unique. It provides a very spooky and claustrophobic atmosphere. Umbro, like Radiant Behemoths, can be quite difficult and at times frustrating to take down, but I find them far less frustrating than Radiant Behemoths. They're also much better and much more cool to look at, as is the art style of the landscapes. The legendary behemoth, the Thrax, is quite creepy, quite unique, but a little bit underwhelming in my opinion, especially when you've got behemoths like the Shroud to contend with. The legendary weapons are also just a little bit underwhelming in my opinion. When activated, they allow you to deal umbral damage to nearby enemies and teleport high into the sky, then choose a spot to slam down on, dealing additional umbral damage. Next up, we have another beautiful escalation, the Terra Escalation, which is set in Arborhome, the original home to the Farslayers. This escalation has a wonderful environment. It's like being teleported to a high fantasy elven kingdom from the Lord of the Rings or something like that. The Farslayers, just like the Frostwardens, are some of my favourite factions in Dauntless, along with their rich stories and lore. Terra Behemoths can present a fairly good challenge, and they're not too frustrating to go up against as well. And then you have the legendary behemoth, the Agaris, which is an absolutely brilliantly designed behemoth in my opinion. It's an overgrown mass of fungi and roots, and although it's mostly static, it presents a really fun challenge. The legendary weapon is brilliant, especially if you're newer to the game, and it was the first legendary weapon that I unlocked. It allows you to completely revive all your teammates and yourself with the hit of a button. Then we have the Frost Escalation, which I would put up there with the Terra Escalation, an absolutely brilliant one in my opinion. Unlike other escalations, you face a further challenge in that you can be consumed by the frost. This can be difficult to face, along with having to slay the behemoths as well in your first few playthroughs, and it's also a little bit frustrating until you get the hang of it. You can choose from 4 selected boons at the beginning of the hunt, which aids you along your way. I think being in the snowy treacherous mountains and finally being able to see the kingdom of Skaldiscar is probably my favourite amongst all the escalations in terms of art style. And then you have the legendary behemoth, the Urska, which is wonderfully designed as a saber-toothed tiger of sorts. The only letdown of this escalation, I feel, is the legendary ability you get from the weapons crafted from the Urska. The Frost Shield just really doesn't cut it for me. It's not very impressive and it doesn't do enough to grant it status as a legendary ability. Finally, we have the Shock Escalation, and I couldn't actually find a trailer for the Shock Escalation, perhaps because it was the first escalation I think. So here's the Savite reveal trailer, because the Savite is the best Shock behemoth by far, no contest. So the Shock Escalation, in my opinion, is probably one of the weakest. And it's difficult to say that because I feel like the Malkarion is one of the best legendary behemoths out there. However, I just find the whole art style, the terrain for the escalation just to be a little bit bland. There's nothing really unique about this escalation. As I said though, the Malkarion is a very good legendary behemoth. I like the animations for it, I like the design, I think it works very very well. It's just a shame about the rest of the escalation. Okay, so now we're going to rank all of the escalations based on my opinions. And remember, this is subjective, these are just my opinions, and feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. We all have different opinions and different preferences. I'd love to know what yours are in the comment section below. So first up we have the Radiant Escalation. I enjoy the theme, I enjoy some of the puzzle solving, I like the Chronovore, and I feel like the legendary weapon is acceptable. However, Radiant Behemoths frustrate me, especially the Elira. I'm not a big fan of that behemoth. And I'm not too keen for the art style of these behemoths, and that goes for the Radiant landscapes as well. For example, the Paradox Breaks just doesn't do it for me. So that is another negative thing. So taking into account the competition of other escalations, I would place Radiant Escalations in the C category. Next up we have the Blaze Escalation. I very much like the Torgadoro, the legendary behemoth. I think he's very intimidating, very threatening. The legendary weapon, again, is acceptable, but could be better. I very much like the volcanic jungle environment. I wish that was utilised in Dauntless much more. So where to put the Blaze Escalation on this chart? I would say it would be in the A category. Then we have the Umbral Escalation. I very much enjoy the claustrophobic umbral atmosphere that's created by this escalation. I think Thrax is a pretty cool legendary behemoth, but when you have something as nightmarish as the Shroud, it's very hard to compete with, so it could have been a little bit better. The legendary ability is pretty cool, quite unique, but not always the most useful amongst all the other legendary abilities that there are to choose from. With that taken into account, I would place the Umbral Escalation in the B category. Following this, we have the Terra Escalation, which I stated was one of my favourites. I feel like the developers did a very good job of depicting the Arbor home to the Farslayers, and it's an environment that I just kinda want to stay in. It's a shame you have to rush through Escalations. The Agaris is legendary indeed, enormous and grotesque, and the legendary ability is amongst the best, especially for newer players. I think you can already predict where I'm going to be putting this one, S category. Next up, we have the Frost Escalation, another one of my favourite escalations for so many reasons. The threat of being frozen by your environment was very frustrating to begin with, but once I got the hang of it, I found it very, very rewarding. I like Frost Behemoths, I like the environment, I love being able to see Skaldiscar in all its glory. I think the Urska is a very well crafted behemoth, it looks fantastic. However, the legendary weapon leaves a lot to be desired. The ability is underwhelming and underpowered, and that's the only drawback I have of the Frost Escalation. But there's so much to enjoy here, and due to all that, I'm going to place this again as an S category escalation. Finally, we have the Shock Escalation, which I stated was one of my least favourites for a few reasons. The landscape and the art style is pretty bland, there's nothing really unique about it. I understand that it was the earliest escalation and that's probably why, but these have to go against it. In fact, the only redeeming quality of this escalation is the legendary behemoth, the Malkarion, which I find is very well crafted and has a very good animation style. We need more dragons in Dauntless is what I'm trying to say. So where to rank this? It's probably a little bit harsh putting it as a D, but someone's got to go at the bottom of the pile. So D it is. So there we have it, my opinion and my ranking of all escalations in Dauntless. If I had to choose a winner between the Terra and the Frost Escalation, it would probably have to be the Frost Escalation, and that's a purely aesthetic opinion. So, returning back to these wonderful dev blogs, and this time we're talking all about buffs. This actually released back in October, and I was leaving it till last because I figured it was going to be the least interesting. However, there's a few things that they've stated in here which are very interesting. So, buffs simplified. The current buff system in Dauntless is very convoluted, making it not only confusing for veteran slayers, but also oftentimes entirely ignored by newer slayers. Buffs can add new dimension to the way you slay, so we want to make using and understanding buffs simpler for all slayers. Come summer 2024, you will see a major overhaul that streamlines all buffs into a set of 6 core buffs. Perks, amps, cells, weapons, and other sources of buffs will all be converted to grant you stacks of one of 6 core buffs. These core buffs will have bounds that run in either direction, positive or negative. More on this below. So the 6 core buffs are as follows: Might, attack damage changes, critical hit chance and damage changes, speed, movement and attack speed changes, vitality, HP changes, defense, damage reduction or increased damage taken changes, endurance, max stamina and stamina recovery changes. With the introduction of stack bounds in the positive and negative, there are a few interesting things we can do to spice up the gameplay and improve balancing. We can let some creatures or behemoths have attacks that reduce stacks of buffs. Having negative stacks could yield consequences like reduction of max health if you have negative stacks of vitality, or having a percentage chance of doing a weak hit instead of a strong one when you have negative stacks of critical. The why. Clarity at a glance. The current buff's heads-up display can sometimes be unclear and confusing, as many different buffs utilise the same icons with no clear visual distinction. Something like the cross swords icon could represent buffs that give you extra damage, increased attack damage, or something entirely different. Even when the icon for a buff is obvious and distinct, the benefit may sometimes not be. Most of you know that a little running man icon represents increased movement speed, but you would not know exactly how much of an increase. In the new buff system, clarity is a priority. A single glance at your HUD will let you know which of the 6 core buffs you have, as well as how many stacks of it there are currently. The stacks will be clear indication of how much impact a perk provides. For example, if one perk grants you 20% increased damage and another perk grants you 10% increased damage, the first one will be represented by 2 stacks of might and the other by 1 stack. These stacks all funnel into the same might core buff. So in this example, you will see a single might icon on your HUD with 3 stacks filled. Furthermore, a perk's description will now clearly indicate which of the 6 core buffs it contributes to, and how many stacks it will grant or deduct. For example, Predator. The old description is, after not taking hostile damage for 15 seconds, deal plus 35% damage, bonus loss when hit. The new description will be, after not taking hostile damage for 15 seconds, gain 3 held stacks of might. These stacks are lost when hit. Another is Evasive Fury, the old description being, after dodging through an attack, gain 50% attack speed for 25 seconds. The new description will be, after dodging through an attack, gain 3 temporary stacks of speed. Okay, improving build diversity. Having bounds for each core buff, including the one that governs damage, will greatly improve your build diversity. Currently damage is king, and most players sacrifice other utility perks for more damage buffs. In a new buff system, once you have maxed out the number of stacks in your might buff, additional perks will not add more stacks. This will encourage more creative distribution of the rest of your perks to make builds that could fit a wide variety of situations and playstyles. The current system has many different buff effects to consider and memorise when you are making a build. That extra layer of complication makes it hard to know what to choose and how everything works together. With the new streamlined system, you can focus on making builds that are diversified yet simple to put together. Universal stacks and teamwork. We're also looking at ways to leverage buff stacks and player builds in interesting ways via the concept of universal stacks. One idea we're currently considering is placing treasure chests on islands and having these chests require a certain number of buff stacks of a specific core buff type to open. The number of stacks needed may exceed an individual's maximum for that buff type, so you may find it beneficial to team up with other players to meet the universal stack requirement that will unlock the treasure chest for everyone on your team. Okay, so before I finish up this blog, I'd just like to summarise the information we've been given so far. I think it's fair to say that some of this information is not going to go down very well with a large percentage of the more established player base on Dauntless. They've done it before with the Reforge update a couple of years ago when they completely changed the weapon progression system. It didn't affect me too much at the time, I wasn't too bothered because I didn't have any effective established builds. However, now I do, and knowing that all the cells in my builds are now going to change and it's going to completely ruin all the builds is possibly a little bit frustrating, but I can understand why they're doing this, and it actually makes a lot of sense. For example, all the icons that you can see on my HUD just now do not make any sense, they're not very clear. Having more clarity would definitely be a lot more helpful. Also, having more simplicity with builds isn't a terrible thing, especially for newer players. Having 3 stackable improvements for each category of your build is much simpler and could be much more effective if done properly. I think what I'm most interested in is that they're emphasising there's going to be more importance in different kinds of builds. For example, most established players right now focus purely on attack, killing a behemoth as quickly as possible and sacrificing all other elements for that. Again, if done correctly, this could make for much more variety in your builds, along the lines of more traditional MMOs, such as you could have a healer build, a tank build, a DPS build. There's so many different things you could do. Naturally, this might do away with a lot of the builds that are one-hit kills for all behemoths, and this will annoy a lot of people, but it'll put more emphasis on teamwork. It could cause more excitement, it could cause more tension, which in turn could make hunts more thrilling and more exciting. So returning to the tail end of that blog, your feedback matters. We will share more details about this new buff system and how it ties in with changes we are making to cells and weapons later. As always, let us know your thoughts and feedbacks about our upcoming AMA or any time on Twitter, Reddit and Discord. We always wanted to let you know that we have heard all of your feedback on the topics previously covered in our devlogs. We are aware that weapon swapping has raised some concerns about leaderboards and power creep. Taking your concerns into account as we move forward, we certainly expect each behemoth encounter duration to increase slightly, despite the increased power that will come from having 2 weapon options. As for pursuits, our early thinking was to have pursuits replace the hunting grounds entirely. However, after receiving passionate feedback from the community, it became clear that a large number of slayers enjoy the freedom of hunting in the hunting grounds. As such, we have begun to explore a world in which pursuits can coexist alongside the hunting grounds. While we still want pursuits to function as a skill test that allow you to make meaningful progress through the game based on your own ability, we are not quite ready to remove the hunting grounds entirely. We are currently experimenting with a certain progression in which pursuits would unlock free hunting in the hunting grounds. Your feedback also let us know that you like to stay and slay multiple behemoths, explore the island, have shorter load times for hunting grounds, and have fewer loading screens. These are all great notes which will help us as we continue our development for the Shattered Isles. And at the very end of this blog, as you can see, there's this little critter running about, and this excited me an awful lot, so much so that I actually made a video about it. This little guy is an image of one of the pets that the developers shared years ago when they were planning on bringing pets to Dauntless. And as I stated in that other video, I believe that this is an indication, an Easter egg of sorts, that they're going to be adding pets along with this big update in the summer of 2024. This would be a great new addition to the game, and I really hope it actually happens. So let's just wait and see. I'm also very glad to see that the developers are taking on the opinions of the player base, and they're going to be continuing with the hunting grounds. That was the biggest worry I had, if I'm being honest. I don't want to see the hunting grounds go. I like the idea of being able to stay and slay. It's much more casual, it's enjoyable for when you're in a certain mood for that type of hunt. So the fact that they're going to be continuing it in some capacity is very encouraging, and I'm very happy about it. So thank you. So there we have it, the 3rd episode of my Dauntless Discussion Podcast. And I can't really explain in words how much I'm actually enjoying making these. These days I have a very busy, very stressful, very adult life. And being able to completely distract myself from all that nonsense by putting time into this game that I enjoy means the world. And it's very likely, if I wasn't getting any interaction from anyone down in the comment sections, I probably wouldn't continue it. So I'm very grateful to everyone for getting involved, for commenting, for joining the discussion and enthusing about this game. This game isn't perfect, and it's been quite a rough year, I would say. So much so that I know that many of us probably thought we were witnessing the final days of Dauntless. Knowing that the developers had other ideas and are releasing this big update this summer makes me very happy. It's a game that I enjoy spending my very limited time on, so I truly hope to see it thrive this year. But anyway, we've covered so much interesting information today, and I truly can't wait for the next dev blog so we can cover it again in more detail. Before we finish up, I just want to thank ShireenPlays again for taking the time to add to this podcast. I've left a link in the description below to Shireen's channel. If you could take the time to head over there, check out some of her awesome content, maybe leave a like or subscribe. So, we end it here. If you are new to the channel, please feel free to hit that like or subscribe button, or just comment down in the comment section below. Until next time, see you later.